December 1862. Peruvian ships appear on the horizon of an island that is the most isolated inhabited place on Earth. Within weeks, they haul away nearly 1,500 men and women in chains. Among them, almost the entire nobility, the elders who held the memory of the people, and the few who could read a script that no one has managed to decipher to this day. 15 years later, on that same island, 111 people remained. 111, out of thousands. For centuries, we've been told this civilization destroyed itself, that they cut down every last tree and wiped themselves out for the sake of their own giant statues. It's one of the most famous stories in human history, and today science is proving that almost everything we believed was false. The real catastrophe didn't come from within. It came on ships. Stay with me, because what they found in the DNA completely changes who the guilty party really was. Let's start with the place. Rapa Nui sits in the Pacific Ocean, more than 1,900 kilometers from the nearest inhabited Polynesian island and 3,700 kilometers from South America. A tiny speck of volcanic rock lost in the vastness of the sea. Around 800 years ago, a small group of Polynesians sailed thousands of kilometers across the Pacific to settle in one of the most isolated places on Earth, a small and until then uninhabited island they called Rapa Nui. The most recent studies place that arrival around the year 1200, and there they did something astonishing. This small speck of volcanic rock holds nearly 1,000 moai, colossal stone statues that stand like silent sentinels of another age. On average, they measure about 4 meters, weigh almost 14 tons, and are believed to have been carved between 1250 and 1500. Here's where the enigma begins. After 17 days sailing the open Pacific in search of a southern continent, the Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen sighted a small patch of land on Easter Sunday, April 5, 1722. He named it Paaseiland, Easter Island in Dutch. What they saw froze them in place. Enormous stone figures lined the coast, some nearly 9 meters tall, and the scene left the Dutch sailors astonished, as Roggeveen wrote in his diary. But something didn't add up. They counted very few people. When Europeans first reached the island in 1722, they estimated there were only about 3,000 inhabitants. And that's where the great mystery was born. How had a few thousand people raised and moved nearly 1,000 giant statues? To visitors in the centuries that followed, the monuments and the sparse population seemed to tell the story of a civilization that had somehow collapsed. From that apparent contradiction came a theory that became world famous. They called it ecocide, ecological suicide. Its most popular version was spread by Jared Diamond's book Collapse in 2005. The story went like this. Over time, their numbers exploded to unsustainable levels. They cut down all the trees, wiped out the seabirds, exhausted the soils, and in the end, ruined their environment. Their population and their civilization collapsed, leaving only a few thousand people when Europeans found the island in 1722. According to the Ecocide Theory, the Rapa Nui spent all their resources moving and building statues, leaving the island without native animals or vegetation. It became the great moral fable of our time, the island that destroyed itself out of vanity, a terrifying mirror of our own future. But there was a problem, and it was enormous. The data didn't fit. Let's start with the trees. It's true the island lost its forests, but the cause wasn't only the human acts. The Pacific rats, brought by the Polynesian settlers, ate the palm seeds and prevented the forest from regenerating, possibly a bigger factor than human logging. Recent research has modeled the phenomenon. The introduced rats could have reached populations of 11.2 million in 47 years, and a 95% predation of the seeds was enough to stop the palms from regenerating. And here's the first twist. Losing the forest didn't mean the end. It meant adaptation. The islanders adapted to the deforestation by developing rock mulch agriculture, using stone-walled garden enclosures to shield crops from the wind and hold moisture in the soil, an innovation that suggests resilience, not a simple collapse. Second problem. It was said they suddenly stopped making moai when their society crumbled around 1600. False. In a 20-year study, archaeologist Terry Hunt helped refute the idea that the Rapa Nui raised their crops to make room for the moai. Through radiocarbon dating, they discovered that the islanders kept building, maintaining and using the monuments for at least 150 years beyond 1600. And the statues themselves held another surprise. The Rapa Nui oral tradition always said it, and science proved them right. The islanders' oral traditions tell how the statues were walked, using a series of ropes to their final locations. They didn't drag them over thousands of felled logs. They rocked them upright, walking them the way you move a refrigerator. Third problem, the biggest of all. Was there really a demographic collapse before the Europeans? Here comes the definitive proof. To investigate the history of Rapa Nui, researchers sequenced the genomes of 15 ancient residents who lived on the island over the last 400 years, whose remains are kept at the Musée de l'Homme in Paris. The study was published in the journal Nature in 2024. If the population had crashed, the DNA would show it, like a genetic scar, and they didn't find one. The researchers found no evidence of a genetic bottleneck matching a sharp population drop. Instead, the island held a small population that grew steadily until the 1860s. Read that again, grew steadily. There was no mass suicide, no self-inflicted famine, no apocalyptic war. The lead investigator on the case, the DNA, points to another culprit. And the time of the crime is the 1860s, because then, and only then, comes the real disaster. At that point, according to the study, Peruvian slavers forcibly removed a third of the island's population. Remember the scene at the beginning? Over the course of a few months between 1862 and 1863, Peruvian slavers abducted around 1,500 Rapa Nui to work on plantations and in brutal guano mines. They took the elite, the wise, those who knew the Rongorongo script. Many died from the horrific conditions on the ships before reaching their destination. And the few survivors who returned to the island brought devastating diseases with them, including smallpox. The final blow spared no one. In 1868, the French businessman Jean-Baptiste Dutrou-Bornier arrived with a plan to turn much of the island into a giant sheep ranch, stripping the already decimated islanders of their land and sending many to work in Tahiti. By 1877, the population of Rapa Nui had fallen to just 110 people. There's the truth. It wasn't a slow ecological decline. It was a rapid, violent depopulation driven by colonialism. And one last revelation from the same DNA, which also rewrites another part of the story. The analysis suggested that the island's inhabitants reached the Americas in the 14th century, long before Christopher Columbus landed in the New World in 1492. Those navigators weren't naive people who destroyed themselves. They were sailors capable of crossing the greatest ocean on the planet and returning. So the next time someone tells you the fable of the island that killed itself over its statues, remember this. Science called it, bluntly, the final nail in the coffin of that narrative. Rapa Nui did not kill itself. It survived, adapted, and endured for centuries in the loneliest place on Earth. The collapse wasn't its punishment. It was something done to it. And it came, as always, by sea.